Welcome to the Rum Revival. My name's Arminder, and today I'm cracking open these 4 new single cask rum releases from brand new independent bottler Roaming Road Spirits. Now, full disclosure, Mike from Roaming Road offered to send over some rum, and I said yes, and here we are. Now, Roaming Road just launched about a month or two back with an initial lineup of 9 single cask rums from Jamaica, Barbados, Belize, Panama, Venezuela, Guyana, Martinique, and Australia. Now what I have here is the Jamaica 9-year, the Australia 16-year, the Belize 17-year, and the Panama 20-year. So I thought I'd crack open these 4 rums on camera and give you my initial gut reaction to them, but then I thought a little harder and decided to do more than just that. So for each rum, you'll see my first reaction to it, and then you'll see me coming back to it about a week or so later, having tried it a number of times since then. This will give me hopefully the ability to spend some good amount of time with it and give you more refined tasting notes and maybe a more thought through opinion. I've found that while initial reactions are fun and semi-useful, they are just that. They are initial thoughts. And that given enough time, your opinion on a rum can change. You might like it more, you might like it less, or maybe you were spot on right from the get-go, but let's see where I land with these 4 rums. All right, so first up is the Jamaica 9-year. This is a rum from Hampden Estate. It's their Diamond H mark. It's their 4th highest rum in terms of ester count, coming out at like around 900 to 1,000 grams per hectoliter of pure alcohol. This is wild fermented. It's pot distilled and then aged 5 years in Jamaica and then another 4 years in Europe, giving us that total of 9 years of aging. And it's bottled at a divine 66.6% ABV. Let's crack it open and see what it's all about. All right. First thing that kind of jumps out is what you'd kind of expect with a higher ester Hampden. You get some, rotting tropical fruit. Specifically, I'm getting pineapple. Maybe the faintest hint of like nail polish remover, but right now it's not big, bold, and apparent. Ooh. That 66.6% ABV is no joke. It has some of those strong, slightly acidic, sourish notes wrapped up with some of that tropical fruit, dryish on the palate, ultimately, the finish. There's some black pepper. There's some marker there as well. It's not like rich and like gushing with juicy, like overripe tropical fruit. But of course, I will take a week or so and try this a bunch and come back to it and we'll see what we think. I'll be right back. Hello, we're getting a little up close and personal here. This is a little bit of a change up in scenery, so it's the future. And speaking of the future, this is not just a week out from when you last saw me. It's actually a month out because, life gets in the way. The holidays got in the way. Working on my end of year video took a lot more time than I thought. So here we are a month later, which is not a bad thing because I got to try these rums a little bit more than I probably would have had it just been a week. So what do I think of the Jamaica since I've had a decent amount of it? Well, in terms of the aroma, in terms of tasting notes, yeah, of course, I get the pineapple, that overripe pineapple that I'm sure I mentioned when I first tried this. But what I didn't really pick up was, in a way, that pineapple's a little honeyed or caramelled. I don't know if caramelled is a word, but there's a little bit of that kind of honey or caramel quality to that pineapple. But the other thing that I absolutely did not pick up on when I first had this in terms of the aroma was that there's another tropical fruit that I'm getting here, which I did not clock at all, but now I get, and it's mango. And there's actually a decent amount of mango on this. Maybe even more like mango leather, like dried mango, I guess. But it's so funny because it's so obvious to me now, which is probably a thing you're going to hear me say a lot of in this video in the future. But yeah, I didn't clock any of that initially, and it's a really nice aroma. Really, really enjoy it, and I think it's a really nice smelling Hampden. So a lot of what I picked up on the palate initially, I still get, right? Obviously that grilled pineapple, that black pepper, and just kind of an observation. The pineapple and that pepper and all that, it's very zippy. And there's like a zippiness to the palate, and there's a lot of action kind of mid-palate and pretty much across your entire tongue. And, there is definitely some like sharp slightly sharp acidity and funk that kind of starts building up, a little sour tartness, bitterness, but it never kind of gets out of hand. Like I've had plenty of other higher ester Hampdens where the acidity is just way too much for my sensitive little esophagus and all that, but not with this one. It kind of hints at some of that, like, oh boy, I think I might have to take some antacid, but never really gets me in a bad place, which is great, you know. I don't want heartburn. Now there's also, I don't quite remember if I picked it up when I first tried this, but there is some hints of cough medicine, cough syrup, but it never gets like full on tussin. And again, I've had a lot of other Hampden rums where it's pretty obvious, pretty apparent, pretty in your face. This just kind of is like a little bit of a hint of it, which is kind of nice. You get a little bit of accent of that, which is always good against like the I think to the pineapple to add some complexity, but not enough where it kind of gets a little distracting and kind of gross. It drinks a lot less. It drinks under that 66.6% ABV, right? You look at that number and it seems kind of intimidating, or maybe you think it's a great thing. I don't know, whatever. But for me, it doesn't drink like that. You know, it could easily be like a low 50s or even a 50% ABV rum. I do think that part of that maybe is the finish isn't as big, bold, and impactful as some of the other Diamond H's I've had or other just higher ester Hampden. So, you know, plus and minus, right? Good in that it's fairly drinkable, but doesn't really have this kind of big, bold finish that kind of that stays with you. So what do I think of this rum now that I've had like this much of it? Well, I like it. I think it's good rum. It's good Diamond H. The problem is, and it's unfair to this rum, but it almost never stood a chance given how much I fell in love with the Down Island Spirits Diamond H from last year. That was my favorite single cask release of last year. I'm pretty sure. Yes, it was. And it's just to me one of the more memorable Jamaican rums I've had in like the last 5 or 6 years. And it's unfair to this rum to have to compete against that. I will say this is a rock solid Diamond H for sure. I think people will like this rum for sure. But it won't be one for me personally that, unfortunately, just given the timing of the release, that I will, when I think back to, 2024, 2025, I'm going to think of that Down Island, unfortunately. Very fortunate for me because I think it's a great rum, fantastic rum. This is just a very good rum. I think for other folks who weren't able to get their hands on that Down Island Diamond Age, this is really good Diamond Age. So, it's not like it's bad. It's a well-made rum. It's a very good tasting rum. But for me, if I had to pick between the two, I'm going to go with that. At some point, I'm going to drink through my Down Island Diamond Age, which I probably will do, to be completely honest with you. That extra amount of burnt caramel and cola will be what I always go to first. But when I'm done with that, I will be happy to drink this one here. Next up is the Australia 16 year. This is from Beenleigh Distillery. It's fermented with their Espombe yeast, which is a type of yeast strain that they actually no longer use, but which created some really flavorful rums that I think they're really known for. This is pot distilled and it's aged 11 years in Australia and then another 5 years somewhere in Europe, and it's bottled at 65.4% ABV. Let's crack this open. Woo, all right. Wow, that's really interesting. What is going on? Initially, I got a little hint of like shampoo or conditioner, but also like some amount of like really interesting tropical fruit, somewhere between like a coconut and pineapple kind of note on the aroma. Wow, that's cool. That's very cool. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm digging that. There is some caramel, a little bit of vanilla. Then halfway through, it veers away, has some of that coconut, a little bit of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like dirtiness, grimy, greasy kind of like oil kind of note. Yeah, it's not a medicinal note. It's not even maybe an industrial note. Oh, actually, there's a little bit of pear that I'm getting as well, which is interesting. But there is a little bit of grime, I guess. And that's not even the right word. Again, this is part of the, trying something for the first time and trying to grasp for words. I'm hoping in a minute or so, when you see me from the future, I will have more articulate words to use to describe what I'm tasting. Play-Doh. That's the note that I was trying to figure out exactly what it was. That grimy, kind of plasticky industrial thing that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Yeah, it took me a month, and having really thought through it kind of tastes like Play-Doh a little bit. But let's step back a little bit and talk about the aroma on the Australia. Here's the thing. Having sat with this now a good amount of time, I don't really get that coconut and pineapple that I was getting on the aroma. Not really getting that at all. So what I got, that first thing you saw, but now what I get when I smell it is a bit of like candied banana. Maybe like an overripe candied banana, which is not a thing. I don't think a banana can be candied and overripe. I think those are two different states of being for bananas, maybe. But that's what I get now, not coconut, not pineapple. But the other thing that I did not clock, and it took me a couple of sessions with this to finally get hip to, is this green apple note. And just thinking about a green apple and smelling this slightly makes me kind of salivate a little bit, just from like the sense memory of eating a tart green apple. And there's also, once that initial kind of hit of candied banana, green apple kind of does its thing, then underneath that, you do pick up a little bit of like slight baked good note, almost like, I'm going to say like a sugar cookie. Not a bold, intense, in your face aroma, but really enjoyable and really unique kind of notes on the aroma. The main thing that I've really locked onto is that pear, which I know I picked up when I first tried this. A lot of pear, a lot of like spiced pear note that is kind of cut by that Play-Doh that I mentioned. And again, when I say Play-Doh, obviously I haven't eaten Play-Doh, but the notion of what Play-Doh smells like is what I associate the taste of this to. And I've had certain like Fijian rums where it's like pretty big, bold Play-Doh. This isn't that. This is a lighter Play-Doh, Play-Doh light, if you will. There's also a little bit of minerality here, rocks or rockiness to it, which I like. Balances out the Play-Doh, adds a nice little accent to the pear. Now, what I did not clock, again, when I first tried this, but now when I've actually kind of sat with this rum, because as you saw when I first tried this, that's you're on for the camera, you're really trying to pay attention to it, and you got to move on to the next rum. What you don't get to do is kind of just sit with the rum, right? And just chill and, maybe read a book, watch some TV and drink the rum. And as I've done with a couple of sessions now, it gives you that time to really focus on the rum, but also not focus. And to me, when I'm in that state of focusing and not focusing is where I really get to kind of hone in on the finish. Sometimes I struggle kind of picking the notes out on the finish, but it's when I'm sort of half paying attention is when I'm able to pick up, notes on the finish. And to me, the finish is all apple, right? I picked it up on the aroma. I'm now getting it on the palate as well. It's not a big, bold apple or anything like that. It's soft, it's subtle, it's a little gentle. But to me, it's very obvious now that it's apple, which, again, didn't pick up initially. This feels like it's more of a almost kind of softer, gentler take compared to other Australians. I think there's some of the apple that I picked up here. I feel like I've gotten in other Australian rums before, other Beenleigh rums. This, though, just doesn't have some of the intensity of some of the other Australians, which is nice. I'm all for that. I want, again, something to be drinkable and in a way sessionable, even though this is 65.4% ABV. But again, it does not drink like that. I would totally think this is like low 50s or 50 even. It feels like you could crush a lot of this. If that makes sense, you shouldn't. That's a lot of ABV, but it's just a flavorful Australian rum, and something that to me, at least especially against the Australians that I have on hand right now, this is almost, if not the top of the list, like easily top 2 or top 3 I think I like it that much. All right, so next up is the Belize 17 year. This is from Traveler's Distillery out there in Belize. It's calm distilled, aged 12 years in Belize, and then another 5 years in Europe, and it's bottled at 62.2% ABV. Let's crack it open. It's not a, right now at least, it's not a big, bold aroma. It's caramel, a little bit of brown sugar, some vanilla. Not doing a whole lot of anything radically kind of beyond that, I think, but pleasant enough. Oh, immediate gut reaction. That's tasty. That is, for lack of a better word, rummy, you know, which I don't know how useful that is. Sometimes when I say it, I feel like I know what I mean, and I hope people understand kind of what I'm saying. Sometimes I don't know what I'm saying when I say it. I think I know where I'm on this. This just feels like good rum, right? It's not funky, it's not vegetal, it's got good age quality to it, and there's a rumminess to it. I'm getting a little bit of like raspberry, maybe. Raspberries covered in a little bit of vanilla and caramel, maybe. There's a little bit of a molasses quality here. I would say of the three so far, this is probably the most approachable and someone kind of relatively new to the rum space probably enjoy this, I think, initially over the other two. Well, that's my initial gut reaction, but I'm gonna come back a week from now or so and let you know what I really think. All right, so the Belize. I've spent a good amount of time with this, and look, to be honest, I still am struggling to pick up a whole lot of stuff on the aroma. It's such a light aroma. Like, I've poured this, let it sit for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it still doesn't really hit you over the head with a lot of obvious apparent notes on the aroma. Adding water, the aroma is still pretty light and subtle. The thing though that I do pick up is caramel, but it's almost like a hard caramel, like the outside of a caramel covered apple or something like that. That type of caramel, at least that's what it kind of reminds me of, instead of like caramel in its liquid form or in its caramel form, whatever. Yeah, I wish I had more, more to give you in terms of notes on the aroma, but I just don't, and I've tried very, very hard. A little bit of oak and that hard caramel. So the thing that I want to articulate is this isn't really as rummy as I first thought. You know, when I first tried this, I'm like, oh wow, it's very rummy. And I guess it is if you compare it side by side to the Australian and the Jamaican, sure, which is what happened in what you just saw when I first tried this. And to a certain extent now, because I'm doing this all back to back, yeah, this feels a lot rummier. But in isolation, when I've had the Belize over the last month or so, and that's all I've had, in terms of like that's the only rum I've had, it's not as rummy as when I compare it to the other rums. In fact, it's, you know, a little drier. So what do I get? I get caramel, I get oak, a little bit of molasses, but it is not super rich or heavy. It's not that rummy note that I kind of first thought. And you know what? To be honest, not getting as much of that raspberry that I had first picked up on. There's maybe a little bit of that, but not really, you know? To me, it's all kind of aging, all wood flavors. If I'm being real, I think you can kind of tell from how I'm describing it, like it didn't really wow me, you know? The one thing I will say though is, yeah, this is a very straightforward, almost middle of the road seems a little harsh, but that's not what I mean. But relative to the Jamaica and the Australia, it definitely feels a little more middle of the road. But it does have a bite. Part of that is the ABV. So while you're getting those oak notes, it ends on a little bit of a bite, which is nice. I appreciate that. Again, just something to kind of provide a juxtaposition or an accent. But the one thing that I just picked up relatively recently, like just 2 or 3 days ago, that I'm getting now, is the finish has this really interesting, almost spearmint note, you know? It's not big and bold. It's not like a Trinidad rum where it has a lot of mint or menthol. It's just the lightest little bit of spearmint. And it's nice. It's pleasant. And that's my favorite part of the rum, probably that little bit of finish. it's well made. You know, it's not bad rum. It's not gross or nasty. It is what it is. Like, it's not trying to be anything that it's not, you know. And this is made to be a very particular type of rum where it's all kind of, you know, wood and age derived flavors, and that's kind of what it's doing, but there's not enough there for me to really be enamored by it or really kind of immediately want to go grab it off the shelf. If the spearmint was a little heightened, you know, then I could be like, oh yeah, that's something I really want to grab and drink. But since it's not, it's, you know, it's perfectly fine. You know, it's again well made, but it's not something that I'm gonna go out of my way to drink. And lastly, we have the Panama 20 year. This is made at Varela Hermanos. It's column distilled. It's aged 10 years in Panama and then another 10 years in Europe, and it's bottled at 59.1% ABV. Let's crack it open. That's an interesting aroma. There's a slightly plastic note. There's definitely like maybe an antiseptic kind of hospital aroma, which I think is actually kind of interesting. I was not expecting that. Well, dude, it had this really, you know, with the other one, was it the Panama? I don't know, one of them. I said there was a little bit of a berry note, or I don't know if it was raspberry, but I feel like I got so much more of that, more complex raspberry, but mostly up front, as opposed to the other one where I think it was on the back end, on the finish. A little bit of like Tussin, Robitussin kind of note, but not as strong as many Jamaican rums, and more of that really kind of raspberry. In fact, it's more of like a raspberry jam. There's that element of sweetness. There's a almost honeyed quality here as well. But let's see what Arminder from the future has to say. All right, so I have a lot to say about the Panama here. And start off with the aroma. You know, I was first talking about how it had this hospital note or antiseptic note. I think now I would describe it almost as a little bit of a smoke note, like a electrified smoke, if that makes any kind of sense. It's not peated, like it doesn't remind me of like a peated scotch or a peated rum or anything like that. There's just this slightly electrified, smoky quality to it on the aroma, which I really like. And also, as it opens up and I've had, you know, sat with this, I get a little bit of light lychee as well, which again, I think is really interesting. Anytime you have like notes that kind of don't seem like they're on the same kind of plane or they're on the opposite ends, that always to me is intriguing. And this has an element of that. Now, this aroma is far more interesting than I initially thought. Here's the thing, straight up, I really like this rum. Might be my favorite of the four. Just gonna say it up front. So it has this kind of dual note initially of chocolate and cough syrup. This is definitely a lot more, to me, cough medicine, cough syrup than the Jamaica, that was that little note. This is a little more amped up, but that's okay. I don't mind it because, one, there's a little chocolate quality, but it transitions into this little note of raspberry. I think I mentioned it earlier when I first tried this, raspberry or strawberry jam. And it's this amazing dovetailing of going from cough medicine, like the Robitussin flavor note, and it kind of sheds all the harsh elements of this, and transitions into beautiful raspberry or strawberry kind of jam or jelly, and it ends up being a little sweet, you know? And to me, that's such a graceful and enjoyable kind of journey on the palate. I think it's such a cool experience. And I do still get a little bit of lychee there as well, little pops of it here and there. Now, it also, I think I mentioned this earlier, if I didn't, it does taste like it's a touch sweetened. Obviously, Roaming Road, you know, they say there's no added sugar or anything like that. And I believe all that, but it just has a little bit of body to it that I really like. A little bit of silky, kind of slightly sweetened thing on the palate that I just think, for what it's already doing, that strawberry jam, that raspberry jam, I'm okay going down that road. Like, you know, that stuff that whether there is added sugar or it's perceived, I'm okay. That doesn't scare me. So that's the video. A big thank you to Mike from Roaming Road for offering to send these bottles and then actually sending them. It was a really fun experience to sit with these for a month, and I'm glad I did. Honestly, maybe I wouldn't have fallen in love with the Panama in just the course of a week. Maybe it did take me that full month to really get into it, but I'm glad I got to have that experience. And it goes to show you, like, first impressions are just that, and they can change. And I think you really do kind of have to give rums more than one shot to make a kind of definitive opinion on something after trying it once. Frankly, I don't think is enough time, I mean, maybe for other people it is, but it's not for me, it took me a while to start liking the Jamaica, because initial opinions, my first sips of any Jamaican rum, it's always mixed, and I never like in love with it because the funk and the acidity. I just need to sit with it a little bit longer. So that this month afforded me the opportunity to be able to wrap my head around the Jamaica, and ultimately, I don't think it ever kind of like wowed me, but like I was able to kind of appreciate it for what it was. But I don't think I would have had I just tried a 1 ounce pour or like a 2 ounce pour. Again, that's just me. I need more time. I need to sit with it. I need to do other things, come back to it, different times of the day, and all that, different mindsets, So this was a really cool experience. All right, that's this video. If you want to support this channel, check out my Patreon page there. I have tons of content there that I think you might like. But I would love to know is there a rum that you've tried that you had an initial opinion on, for good or for worse, and that eventually you tried more of and you ended up liking it a lot more or hating it a lot more from that initial first impression? Let me know by leaving a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Catch y'all next time. Cheers.